Good evening and welcome to the July 8, 2009 Civil Service Commission meeting. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Gantis?
Here.
Chair Abkarian?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Manukian and Coleman are absent.
Okay. Item number 2 is minutes. What's your pleasure, gentlemen?
Move to approve as printed the minutes of June 20. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I wasn't here, so I'm not sure we can take it up this meeting.
Can we do it with 2 votes?
Hold on, unless we have an attorney here.
What I would recommend is that you have 2 out of 3, so that would be a majority. If the other 2 remaining are going to be voting in the affirmative, then it would carry.
Good. Okay.
What does that mean? We can take it up
We can
tonight?
take it now.
Move for approval?
And I would move the gavel. I second it.
Second. Any corrections or additions? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Abstain.
Chair Abkarian?
Yes.
I turn the gavel back over to Chair Abkarian.
All right. Formalities. Okay. We have one item on the one person on oral communication, Dr. Richard Spiritu.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission that are here, and staff. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. The last time I was here, I was talking about the administrative investigative report. I held it up. I'm going to give everybody here, the commissioners, a copy of that report and also a new one, which is the latest report. After reviewing it, I've come to the conclusion I better get my CWP. I have 3 questions to ask you. And for those of you who don't know what a CWP is, it's a concealed weapons permit. Because there's a lot of hostility in this city, including
I thought it had something to do with the water and power.
No, including assaults by employees on employees. After having reviewed this, I'd like to ask the commissioners if any of you had acted on the allegations that were substantiated, such as sexual harassment and assaults. I'd like an answer to that later on, but you haven't seen this. The second question that I'd like to ask you is, my friends and I have had a great deal of difficulty trying to correlate the administrative report and your financial report of cost and correlating them together. I've got one piece of information, there's another piece of information, and for some reason it doesn't dovetail. And I wondered if by some chance a member of staff could educate my finite brain and my friends how to figure this thing out. I also want to raise another interesting question. I had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Bill Fox several weeks ago, and I asked him a question about the Glendale Police Department officer who had filed a report against another Glendale police officer for falsifying time cards. He came back with the response that I have no knowledge of any such report on my desk, blah, 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 blah. And then his next statement was, I just got that on my desk last week. How'd you find out about it so quickly? It also turns out to be on this report. It's the second to the last item. My question...
Dr. Spiritu, I don't mean to cut you off.
Let him finish.
Okay, go ahead.
I know
I'm
what
sorry.
you're going to do.
My other question on this issue is there a policy within the city of Glendale that if an officer is under investigation for something, can he be promoted from sergeant to lieutenant while he's under investigation? Because that happens to be the case with this one particular individual. With that said, I'm going to give, I guess, the 3 commissioners, Mr. Doyle, and your city attorney a copy of this. I did have copies for all the people of the commission.
Hold on to it,
Hold on to
Sandra,
it.
please. Sandra.
Let me speak.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm done.
I'm not really sure what information is in that documentation.
There are no names. No
Yeah, but you know
accuser-
what? The fact that there are no names doesn't. What we pride ourselves, regardless of what we decide in this panel, especially when we go to hearings, is that we have a clear conscience and that we make a decision based on the facts on each particular case on its own, without any outside, hopefully without any outside influences. By providing documentation, even without any names on it, that might not be within our jurisdiction, I'm afraid that might be cutting into our role as the decision makers or the judges. So if you don't mind, prior to us seeing it, because it wasn't presented to our panel previous to tonight, is I would have the documents reviewed by our attorney. If the city attorney's office feels that there are no information in there that could actually jeopardize the impartial position that we have, then we'll be more than happy to take a look at it.
I'm going to hear from our.
I appreciate your position. The only thing that might be incriminating is a case number that is assigned by the investigator.
I don't want to take a look at any of those documents until it's
That's
actually
fine.
reviewed.
That's
Yes.
fine.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I do believe I am familiar with the document that he's referring to because I provided it to him in response to a public records request. It's a chart that I believe that our senior investigator prepares. If I can take a look at it, I think any information with regard to individual names, those accused have been redacted. Even the division has been redacted. So it's just a description of the complaint that was received and the status of her investigation. That information is a public record, and if you're so inclined, you're free to review it.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
The chairman is quite right in what we think, and I think the word he didn't use is that we are impartial fact finders. And I appreciate counsel's position, and I know she's intimately familiar with it. I am concerned that any morsel of evidence that comes to us, other than through a hearing process, could taint this. And I personally, I'm not going to take my counsel's advice. I personally am going to opt out of seeing anything that deals with an investigation, because if it's subject of an investigation, it's possible that it's going to be a hearing in front of us. And for us to even have information that something exists and its status, in my mind, I feel there is a possibility that could be a form of a pre-knowledge of something, and unless my counsel's telling me, no, Mr. Gantis, you're 100% safe, even then I may not take her advice, but I'm just not comfortable seeing anything, knowing anything about investigations, because we only know investigations when they come to us in the form of a hearing. That's my personal opinion, but if counsel disagrees, I can hear that if she likes.
I'd like to ask a question also along the line of what specifically you want this commission to do with that information. What is it? What is your question? What are you looking for us to do?
My question is, I would like to know if this commission has had the opportunity, because a lot of these issues are old, okay? Especially on the assault and the sexual harassment that was substantiated, okay? I'd like to know if you guys ever took any actions on these things.
Or do you mind? Go ahead. Why don't you finish your questions? Because
Okay, well, I was just going to point out, when you say, what has this commission done, at our last meeting, we had a very thorough briefing by the city attorney indicating what our role was and our authorities were in dealing with investigations, and the bottom line was that we have none. That, as Mr. Gantis very eloquently pointed out, that we are a hearing body and that we will hear the results of an investigation if it comes to a disciplinary action. And other than that, we have no role in investigating or figuring out, what should be done prior to it coming to this commission. So in answer to your question, we probably have not seen any of that, nor have we done anything unless a particular case has come to this commission for adjudication.
I I did watch afterwards, because you had gone into closed session. I did watch Mr. Howard's report, listened to it several times, and I disagree with it because of the fact that he was using the Marengo. That happens to be a sovereign nation with the Sheriff's Department. Glendale isn't a sovereign nation. I hate to say that, but that's true.
Yeah, one thing, Dr. Spiritu, we were given a legal opinion by the city attorney's office.
Right.
If we like it, we dislike it. That's what the city attorney's office has given us an opinion on. I don't question Mr. Scott Howard's opinion. I don't question it, because his integrity, for me at least, and his office is like gold as far as I'm concerned. Now, that doesn't mean that if they come in front of me on a hearing that I wouldn't overturn a disciplinary action, and we've done it in the past once. So, but however, if you're not unhappy with the language in the charter because it's not clear, then you can do a charter revision in the city and have people sign it, and you can revise the charter to a point where you would say Civil Service Commission will have investigative right on discrimination and on sexual harassment. This way, then there won't be any question what our role is given to us in the charter. We don't, unfortunately or fortunately, and I do understand what the city attorney told us, our job is as judges looking at the evidence put in front of us. We don't have investigative right. The investigative right would be with the department, with the city manager's office, or with the city council, I'm assuming, at some point, if they believe that the discrimination or sexual harassment gets to a point where it becomes unbearable, or with the federal, some kind of a federal oversight. We don't have that authority. I don't know what we can do. We can't do anything but to listen to the case, to come up with a conclusion based on that case. I thought that we had the ability to investigate, and I agree with the city attorney that we don't, because then how do you have an investigation? If we come up with a conclusion at the end of the investigation, who reviews that investigation? As such, you're more than welcome to come in here. You're more than welcome, as we've always done, welcome you to come down here and give us your opinion without jeopardizing any police officer's rights or any other individual's rights. And you've done that very, very carefully to make sure that there are no rights that are being violated in here. But at the same time, I want to go ahead and focus you to issues that we have control over. We have no control over investigation, sexual harassment, or even discrimination. If a department in the city is discriminating against a ethnic race, let's say, we have no ability to do anything about that. It's not something that's under our privy, and maybe you want to talk to some other department. But I just want to bring that to your attention. But you're more than welcome to come down here. You're more than welcome to give us your opinion. In reference to documents you give us, I personally am not going to take a look at them, unless if they're some article or something that you want us to read in reference to general information, but specifically having to do with the case. I look at that document, and 6 months later that document's come in front of me. I'm going to say, whoa, Dr. Spiritu told me A, B, and C, and I'm already prejudging that case, and that's not fair to the individual who's coming in front of us.
That's fine, but it looks like I'm going to have to set aside about $25,000 to get enough signatures to do a change.
If you do that, then legally we have a right to do an investigation, or maybe another body, like a police commission or a fire commission or an employee commission, will be put in. Then that's something that you decide to do. That's up to you. We don't have the authority to do that now.
I think this commission is very capable and competent of doing that.
Dr. Spiritu, you need to do what you need to do.
Just one comment, Dr. Spiritu, if you did listen to Scott Howard, the second issue in doing that, if you were to do that, is if in fact we had the investigative ability, and we did an investigation that led to a finding that would lead to a termination or other discipline that would lead to a hearing, this body would have to recuse itself from that hearing because it would have done the investigation, which means then the city gets the pleasure of hiring outside hearing officers to hear these cases at. You've seen the expenses on some of those cases that we're talking about at those, so they'll be able to pay a hearing officer and a lawyer for the hearing officer, to the extent that we'll add probably $40,000 or $50,000, if not more, to the city budget.
But
So
Mr.
that's
Gabbard,
another
you can
issue you
have-
got to keep in mind in
Yeah,
terms of this commission.
you can have a fire, police, and an employee commission that would actually do the investigation, and we'll actually hear their
No, you're
conclusions.
right.
So-
That's my point. It's a different commission.
There must be another body that might actually have to come in, and if you want to collect signatures, God bless you. Do what you'd like to do. That's your right. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. We're definitely not getting out of here at 5:25.
I like my 5:35.
There you go. Okay, what's next?
Recruitment and examination status report.
Move to accept.
Still?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is our recruitment and examination status report for this meeting. Approximately a page and a half. You see a moderate level of recruitment activity. You see some activity primarily in the Water and Power Department, Community Development and Housing. Many of those are the economic stimulus positions that are being brought in. And some hourly positions in parks, and a couple here and there, fire and police. But for the most part, again, somewhat reflective of a reduced level of recruitment activity. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Just one quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
How do we know which of these are the stimulus jobs that we had approved? Are they something we can identify? Or
Certainly, Mr. Gantis, typically, if it'll have that the words unclassified
I see, yes.
after that, that would be an indication that it's a. You see some of those assigned to Ms. Akopian and some assigned to Mr. Soto on the back.
move to? We don't need to take an action, do we? No.
What's next?
New class specification for approval, fleet manager.
Go.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a new class specification for a newly established classification of fleet manager. This is a position which we hope to go out and fill through an open recruitment process to head up a consolidated garage and warehouse operation. This has been somewhat of a long-term project for the city to take its four active garage and warehouse operations and consolidate them under single management. As the report indicates, we have a garage fleet operation in Public Works. We have one in Water and Power, one in Police, and one in Fire. And that's the point of this is to, again, take advantage of the consolidation, all of the various benefits of that, economies of scale, and streamlined operations, sharing of equipment and such, and put it all under one managerial position. This position, again, will be a fleet manager, and again, to fill it soon upon your approval of this class specification. If you have questions, be happy to try and answer them. Mr. Zern from Public Works is here. This position will be within the Public Works Department, and also Ms. Akopian is here as well.
Ms. Gantis.
A couple of questions. I know we don't have any. This is a new position. Will the creation of this consolidation eliminate positions that are now maybe supervising just police or just fire, so that we're having some economies of scale?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Mr. Gantis,
Your name?
Steve Zern, Director of Public Works. Currently, the four garages have what I call a supervisor position. Those will all remain. Those are all filled. This position is actually a vacancy that occurred in the Water and Power Department. They had an administrator who retired. That's what we're capitalizing on. So there's not a new position. It's simply taking that position and upgrading it to the current title and salary scale, and using that to effectively manage, ultimately administer the four garages.
So this has all been effectively. Then it's a little more costly position, but more efficient position.
More efficient. The sense of the consolidation in and of itself is an efficiency measure. Our first step is to consolidate the administration. Slowly but surely, as we go through, as Matt had indicated, Mr. Doyle indicated, there's a number of other issues: consolidating equipment use, possibly consolidating staffing levels in the future. But the first step is to put it all under a single management group with a single administrator.
My second question goes to the education training. You know, why do we need college? You have you have people that are in automotive that my senses are, for the most part, long on experience, but probably not much on formal training. And are we not allowing those people who really understand that to be there if they don't have college training?
Well, Mr. Gantis, we talked quite a bit about this. My experience has been, especially in the last several years, that traditionally in what we'll call the blue-collar sector or the field operations, supervisors have come up through the ranks. There was less emphasis on actually college education, formal education, more emphasis on actual experience in having done that. What I found is over time, you're beginning to see folks with college educations who are getting into these fields. They may now be more a management type person, somebody who has a broader understanding of general management and general management practices, and less the expert in how actually a wrench is turned or a piece of equipment is operated. We're seeing the maintenance services field, we're seeing integrated waste management field, where folks are coming in with degrees and advanced degrees at the upper management level. And you're seeing, actually, in some cases, less of the folks who actually rose through the ranks from maintenance worker or driver. And so when we redid this position, we went in that particular direction.
It's not very convincing to me, because I understand integrated waste manager, but there's so much green and regulations. This is a guy that's going to get there and make sure your cars are okay. I have a hard time thinking that a college degree, the guy taking care of my car has a college degree. And anyway, that's my feeling.
Mr. Gantis, I would just, he probably doesn't, and the individuals who are actually making the repairs to the equipment don't either. This is the individual who has to manage 4 managers, 4 different garages. Also, as you'll see, a little bit of a unique structure here. We have a fleet management board, which is the 4 department heads from each of the departments who have this policy body role in this. So we're looking at somebody who's more of a manager and less of a technician. We have the able-bodied folks to turn the wrenches. But again, I'm just as an example, the integrated waste administrator, this is my operation, is a master degree who never picked up garbage. My maintenance services acting or assistant administrator is somebody who has a master's degree who didn't necessarily shovel asphalt or finish concrete.
Maybe you should have them do that.
Well, they
know what the regular people do.
They've gained that experience, but not directly. But they also have that overall management experience and advanced education.
You know, Gantis, are you done?
I'm done. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mr.
I just had one question. The Fleet Maintenance Board, what is that?
The Fleet Maintenance Board is the 4 department heads: Fire Chief, Police Chief, Director of Public Works, and the General Manager of Water and Power. As you can imagine, taking 4 separate bodies where each department had ultimate control over their particular body and consolidating them, this was a way for us to, in a sense, transition into this so that the individual departments still had an active role in at least the top policy level. Obviously sometimes there's some concern about, well, in the fire department we don't do it the water and power way, so are you going to make us do it the water and power way? And the answer is no. I mean, we're always going to be doing this from the perspective of what's best for the overall operation. So this keeps each of the 4 department heads active in the process.
Let me ask a question. Why wouldn't you leave it the way it is? Because it seems like it works best. You eliminate the Fleet Maintenance Board, which basically does what they do now. You eliminate the fleet manager. You basically have each supervisor from the police, from fire, from GWP determine what's best for that department and do the work. Why would you have a fleet manager complicate this whole thing? Have a fleet manager, which is one level, then go up to Fleet Maintenance Board, which is another level, then go it being you. I think it just complicates things more than it actually solves things. I don't really see the efficiency of this process, except that now you have a person who is called a fleet manager who's getting paid more to do the job.
Well, to Mr. Chairman Abkarian, to manage 4 garages, and you then have a single management philosophy, you begin to have a single management or administrative operation where we mentioned economies of scale, how there's potential for future cross-training where you can have mechanics that have the ability to work on different pieces of equipment. That may give us the opportunity to ultimately reduce our staffing levels. 4 separate garages in some sense is having, what we had is 2 administrators, and then in those cases where an administrator wasn't there, you had a battalion chief and a police captain who were performing those duties. Now we put it under a public works department, which is the department that is most like to be responsible for fleet management, and not adding a new position, but simply upgrading slightly because of the greater span of control, the administrator or fleet manager.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I will tell you, I am not inclined to vote for this with the college, and I'm just not convinced that, and I'm a big college fan, as all of you know. I'm more and more training, but this is a position, seems to me, I would say it's okay, but I think there ought to be a level of experience that can be considered in lieu of college training, because I've read the essential functions, and a lot of it is, you got a guy down there, as he says, the cross training. You just need, and I think a gold grease monkey is what you, and I don't think that person necessarily has college training, and he's worked his way up, and I think that's
Mr. Kansas, it really is a management position. It's not a maintenance position. That's the difference between this particular level and a level of a equipment maintenance supervisor, is that this is really not a hands-on position where you actually go and fix cars. This is more of a management position where you actually manage all 3 garages, report to the fleet maintenance board, and basically arrange to make sure that everything is, and you know that I'm not a big college guy.
I know.
And I think that this kind of job should be offered to other people, but because this is a management position, going back to the fleet maintenance board, if we do approve it, and managing really 4 different departments, not actually getting in there and actually doing the, so to speak, dirty work, I don't have too much problems with it. I do think that there should be a consideration for experience, because there are experienced garage maintenance guys who are 20 times better managers than some college degree guys or some bachelor degree guys.
with an engineering degree.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dave.
I was just going to mention, if I could, because I'm flexible, obviously, on this. My intention wasn't to have, I don't think this is going to be the, a PhD in biophysics that we're going to have running this. Maybe we will. I don't know. But the way I work,
Still, this bachelor is highly desirable.
and we can just say that's desirable. We can say that, we can strike that. But if you read what the core is, 2 years of college or other formal training, which in my mind is trade tech, ASE, which is the association or organization that certifies mechanics and
But
mechanic
you have that
managers.
under licenses. They've already gotten that under their license.
That's a
But
desirable, too.
Right, but what I'm saying is it's not college or nothing. It's formal training. That formal training may be specific to automotive or heavy mechanics.
Mr.
And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could we hear from Mr. Devine, and then
Doesn't he have an engineering degree?
Can I apply for the job?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. 2 comments. One, I concur with Chair Abkarian's concern about even the need for this. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Doyle, that's a little bit beyond the purview of this commission, since we're really here not to talk about the concept of the organization, but approve or disapprove the job bulletin. So
actually, that's not true. Anytime we have a bulletin in front of us, any general discussion in reference to the bulletin, in reference to the approval of the bulletin, having to do with that particular job, is a discussion that we can have here.
it's a discussion that you can have, but if a position has been budgeted by the city council, it's not really this commission's role to determine whether or not it can be filled. The commission, at least tonight as it stands, your role is limited to commenting and making and suggesting changes to this specification, whether it be minimum requirements, college, or not. You may not even like the title or something. But
Isn't that what we've done, saying that the 2-year college education is
correct?
desirable?
Absolutely.
Well, all right.
Absolutely.
Well, that's my second point, that I agree with Chair Gaddis, or Commissioner Gaddis, that 2 years of college, but when you read the whole thing, as Mr. Zern pointed out, it says, or other formal training, and I think that really gives the appointing authority the flexibility to pick someone that they feel will best fill the job. And I personally have no problem with saying the 2 years of college or other formal training,
Period.
and giving them the ability to pick, as I say, the best person they believe will fill the position. So I would leave it as it is.
But do we want to say, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we're saying engineering,
You have something
business?
against
No, I'm
engineers?
just not sure it applies.
I put in here 2 years of college or other formal related training, period.
Mr. Chair, if I could add, as I'm looking at the organization chart for this position, I'm trying to count. It looks like this will be a section of something like 40 employees, which is pretty significant. It's a pretty significant operation to manage, and again, this commission can make any decision they like relative to the education and training, but to have someone managing 40 individuals and 4 separate operations, and with an initial mission to save money and to make sure that this garage isn't buying their tires somewhere else when they could buy them together and save money, really to try and have a mission of obtaining more efficiency in this operation. There's a lot of advanced work that's been done in the fleet management field. A lot of computer programs, a lot of products out there that you're really going to want somebody with good writing skills and good managerial skills overall. So I'm thinking the education does make sense. I mean, as Steve has indicated, we're not requiring an AA degree. That 2 years could be met through community college or even 2 years at a university or at a place like Trade Tech, or the ASE certifications would be certainly a relevant skill. But this is a big job, and it's an important job. And frankly, with the way the economy is, I think my opinion is that we're going to get a lot of applicants for this job. I think there are a lot of these people that are out of work, a lot of warehouses that have been shut down, a lot of big companies that have been downsized, and I could easily foresee 50 to 100 applicants. And
Is it open?
It will be open. I think that's
Correct.
the intent. So,
And with that, I would move for approval as written.
Like your language. You don't like your language?
It's okay. Can we, before you actually move, maybe have a couple more discussions on this? 2 years of college or other related formal training, period. Wouldn't that give you enough to go on, or do you want something more?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I would be comfortable with that. If that makes you comfortable, that minimum, I would not want to strike the whole thing. I would want to keep the 2-year college and formal education. But if it's giving you some discomfort to have the highly desirable 4-year degree in those various fields we've listed, I'm okay with that not being in there.
Well, I don't mind putting desirable in there, because if you do get somebody that's got that, and you're going to say, gee, I want that guy, he's got the degree.
Well, but I think you'll get that anyway. I mean, it just is a sense that sometimes when you put this, Matt knows more than I, you begin to open it up a little bit. People look at this and go, this isn't just a wrench turner or a mechanic. This is something at a higher level. They're actually looking at an advanced or a bachelor's degree. I see that this is something a little bit more than just managing a local garage.
Okay.
Still with your language.
Do you think that people who have a bachelor's degree just won't apply? Is that what it is?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that'll be the case. What I'm saying is that with the extra language, you'll have people sometimes look at this, and as you know, and sometimes the title can be deceiving. Fleet manager. Oh well, I'm a mechanic supervisor for a couple of people doing some sedan work. But I think as you go through this, you see that, you look at it, it kind of tells you that there's more to this job. But I don't think it's going to prohibit or preclude us from getting higher educated applicants.
Don't forget, we need the 5 years of experience in fleet maintenance, so we're not talking about the guy with the 2.
No, absolutely, Mr. Gantis. That's a critical component there. That's why I said, that's kind of the theory I had, is if you put that line, highly desirable, with the bachelor's degree, it gives someone a sense that this is a little bit bigger job than maybe just managing the corner garage. But at the same time, if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, or is the only thing that makes you uncomfortable between approving this, I'm okay with having that removed, as long as we keep that first sentence.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would suggest, I like Mr. Abkarian's language, 2 years of college or other, I said related formal training, period, and then a bachelor's degree in a related field will be considered. In other words, you'll say to them, it's a little bit more, but we're not going to say it's desirable. We'll consider it, but I understand it opens it up, but a lot of times those guys, the grease monkeys, so to speak, that have been doing fleet maintenance, we're not talking about the two-man garage, are going to be able to give you a lot more insight, I think, than maybe, and maybe not. Maybe you'll have both. Maybe you'll have a grease monkey with the bachelor's degree, and you say, there it is.
That would be great. That would be
would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
We would strike gold there.
You don't have a second.
No, I withdrew the motion.
Oh, now it's with, I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we change the education training, 2 years of college or other related formal training, period. The rest of that sentence is eliminated. A bachelor's degree in a related field will be considered, period.
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
Is there a second to that? I'm going to...
Well, I'll second it, but before I do, I'd like to ask both Mr. Zern and Mr. Doyle if they see any problems with that wording.
I don't. If you would indulge me, can I read back to make sure I've got this?
Mr. Zern, you are the expert in here standing in front of us. If you really want that language, give me a very good punch. So I would say, you know what, Mr. Zern really convinced me. But, I think this language that we just gave you does what you need it. But if you have other suggestions, please throw it in.
And I would. I'm not shy in that regard. I think we have it. if I could read it back to make sure I'm understanding. 2 years of college or other related formal training, period. A bachelor's degree in other related field will be considered.
In a related
field will be considered.
In a related. I'm fine with that.
Okay. And I'm fine with that, too.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Abkarian?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cern.
What's next?
Report on commission hearing expenses.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, we have as per the Commission's request, this is a report which documented the disciplinary appeal hearings that this Commission has conducted going back to the year 2005. This report provides the actual costs that the city has incurred during these hearings. This report contains the types of appeal cases that we're hearing by the form of disciplinary action. It talks about the general duration of that hearing, who represented the appointing authority, who represented the commission as far as counsel to the commission, whether or not there were court interpreter costs, and then the overall cost to the city. We did exclude the individuals' names from these cases just because they were disciplinary cases, and the vast majority of them were in fact closed hearings. But the report does give a good indication of not only the number of hearings we've had over the years, because that tends to fluctuate, but really what we have spent on these hearings. And the one obvious finding of this report is that the hearings involving our sworn individuals do tend to have a higher cost, and that's primarily because on those cases we utilize outside attorneys to represent the appointing authority. Those costs, both the preparation and the hearing itself, tend to be substantial. The rest of them, where we do have one of the members of the city attorney staff representing the appointing authority, tend to be rather modest in cost, with the only cost of those typically being the counsel to the commission. That would be Mr. Potter, who handles the vast majority of these. This report was, I think, pretty illuminating, and did give some indication of just how much we spend on these things. And I think this was first asked for many years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, when
7 years ago.
When we were in fact having some very expensive hearings. So it does appear that these costs have gone down a bit. But anyway, if this item is for your to note and file, and any questions or discussion you may have, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
A couple of questions. One, of course, being the newest member on the commission, seeing these costs, I was rather surprised. And so,
How low are they, or how high they were?
How high they are.
Okay.
And so I had a couple of questions, and I'm going to direct them both to the city attorney and to Mr. Doyle. The first one is, do you see any, or could you make any suggestions or recommendations as to changes in these procedures or changes in the staffing for the different types of hearings that would, in essence, reduce the costs to the city?
Okay, let me just make sure that we all understand before they answer it. You understand that the costs on the right side has to do with the cost paid to. We don't have any cost of staffing.
No,
added in here.
The city pays this.
That is correct.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the cost. I know these aren't civil service commission costs,
or the staff costs,
or the staff costs, but I'm asking whether some changes could be made in terms of who we have do the appointing authority representation and the commission representation, whether alterations or changes could be made such that these costs to the city could be reduced. And I'll start with our attorney, Ms. Barpetian.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as you could see for these hearings, we're required to have 2 sets of counsel. One is counsel from the City Attorney's Office, and the other is outside counsel. Typically, what we do is we have outside counsel represent the Commission, and we handle the advice from the representation of the appointing authority through our office. That is probably a considerable cost saving to the city, and the reason that we do that is to avoid any potential conflict that there may be, that our office is representing both the commission and the appointing authority. And typically our office represents the non-sworn represents the appointing authority if the matter concerns a non-sworn hearing. The reason that we don't do that for the sworn hearings is that we also do training for the police department. We also represent them in other lawsuits, like false arrest and other suits where the police department may get sued. And we find that it may create some difficulty in our office to perform the dual role. both to represent the officer in a lawsuit where the city is being sued by the public, and then also represent the appointing authority if the officer is the subject of the lawsuit. So that's typically why our office has refrained from representing the appointing authority in matters that involves a sworn officer.
Okay. Then in the cases where you're representing a non-sworn officer and use a staff attorney, where you're doing a sworn officer and you're using a non-staff attorney, is it possible then to have a staff attorney represent the commission?
I think in
Advise the commission?
I think in the past that had been the case, but more recently I think it has been more an issue of staffing from our office than anything else. We have one fewer attorney than we did in the past, and it does require a certain level of expertise in litigation matters. It's the role calls for someone who has experience in litigation and is very familiar with the evidence code. That would typically be the attorneys that are litigators, and more often than not, they're representing the appointing authority in these matters. So I can certainly take that back to our city attorney, and as a recommendation or as a suggestion from a commissioner.
I'm not sure I'm making a suggestion. I'm just asking whether that option is available, and it sounds like it is. And with that, I would turn to Mr. Doyle and ask, from a financial standpoint, would that be something your office would recommend or suggest?
Well, I agree with everything the city attorney said. I think the most effective means of mitigating these costs would clearly be to have in-house attorneys represent both the counsel to the appointing authority and be counsel to the commission. And that, in fact, is actually something that could be done legally. I think there was a case, Quintero versus Santa Ana, which actually said that was okay. But I think in the abundance of caution, we have tried to really separate our advisory role to the commission versus that person who sits here and acts as an advocate, with regard to the discipline. And from my standpoint, it just seems a lot fairer to keep them separate to avoid that type of a conflict. But that would be the most obvious way of saving costs on this.
Mr. Chairman.
And if I could add one other thing about whether or not to have city attorney staff serve more frequently as the advisor to the commission. The feedback we have gotten from the commissioners themselves is that they prefer to have an outside counsel representing them. I don't want to speak for any of the commissioners, but that's the clear message that I've gotten, particularly in the last few years. So.
Scantus?
I think it's that's a correct. The last statement Mr. Doyle made is a correct statement. It wasn't done with an easy decision. The concern when you do have from each of the city attorney, one of the concerns is exactly as our counsel, Ms. Varapetian, has indicated.
Varpetian.
All right, Varpetian. Excuse me.
What are you?
I don't know. I mispronounced it. Apologize.
Okay.
Is the expertise. These are litigation type issues, and in some instances there may be the conflicts that arise, as she said, for instance, in sworn officers. If they're going to conflict out because of that as the appointing authority, then they need to conflict out to represent the city in the Civil Service Commission. But I think a far bigger our job is quite subject to review by the Superior Court. We have to ensure, in my mind at least, I want to ensure
that we don't get in a position where we have to go to the Superior Court and we worry about spending. If we look at what Mr. Potter charges, it's minuscule. Mr. Divine, you can glean on one of these that you and I sat on, the expense, and you know how much work Mr. Potter did, and his expense was, I think, was very, very low for the amount of time he's had to put into this one, and involved the Spanish interpreter, and you and I were there to see that. And my concern is that he is there. We want to ensure that our record is protected, that the conflict, we had an assistant city attorney on one, and assistant, that the appellant might be able then to take it to Superior Court. We then, as the city, would have to hire counsel or spend time and expend a lot of money in defending the writ that's brought to the Superior Court, and we've seen what that entails. We've seen the controversy and the letters surrounding the case that Mr. Mullen against the city, and the amount of expenses that were incurred on that writ, to the extent of $600,000 plus in attorney's fees, plus the $29,000 in costs that this city didn't incur upon Mr. Milano, but a judge ruled Mr. Milano had to pay for bringing this. When you say, okay, maybe we'll spend might have to spend $600,000. Now you start looking at, this is like record amounts, right? So if it's spending $3,349.50 on Mr. Jones, you can do that 20 cases and you're still not spending the $600,000, and we don't have 20 cases that get to that. So I look at it as this. I look at it as an abundance of caution that you spend a little bit of money, quality money, may I add, because I don't want anybody to mistake this. And we have outstanding outside assistance with Mr. Potter. We're very comfortable with Mr. Potter. We get the advice that we think is going to, and he is forever protecting this city, so that if we have to take it to the next level, we're comfortable that, because if we were to lose on the next level and we didn't get that comfortable advice, then it comes back, and then we've got to have a whole new hearing that we're disqualified on. We hire another hearing officer, hire another lawyer. We could wind up spending $1 million to save $5,000. I'm not willing to take that chance. I think from a financial standpoint, it is a minimal expense. In some instances, but we got to be clear about one thing. As Mr. Doyle indicated, the first report came when Mr. Abkarian and Mr. Coleman came on in 2002, and it was an eye-opener. I was pleased that they did it. We had one case. What was it, 100? Remember, it was $111,000, $18,000 in reporters' fees that were paid out of the Civil Service Commission budget. We got rid of that quickly. We said, okay, you wanted a reporter, and you look down here. Either the appointing authority pays for it, or the which of course is the city. But in one case here, you see the appellant paid for it. That means the city didn't pay for it. We have gone over this, and we clearly have put into effect, I think, cost savings and still preserve the integrity of this process. We can't stop litigation. We can't stop a request for a hearing. We can't dictate to the appointing authority who they're to hire. Well, some of them, there are some expensive appointing authority lawyers here, but that's the appointing. We can't tell them, no, you can't do that. That's their job, their budget. That's for them to decide. But from our standpoint, from our costs are limited to Mr. Potter, our outside counsel, and whatever staff. That's all we have control over. And for us to say, well, maybe we can risk that one case that we're going to spend $600,000 and suffer the unknown. I mean, I don't even understand why we're hearing what we hear. I think I've made my point. I'm done. Well, I want to get to the 6:15.
I got it. For that, let me just make a quick comment, Mr. Devine, also, so you would know the background on this. Back when we first came into this onto this commission back in 2005, the court reporter's fee alone was anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000, sometimes $2,000. So when you added up the numbers in 1 year, the city on just the court reporter fee was spending hundreds of thousands just on court reporter fees. We basically came in and said, wait a minute, we have a great recording that records everything on CD and on tape. On 11 of the 19, no one has requested any whatsoever, which means, if nothing else, if you go $2,000 or even $1,000, we've saved $11,000 to the city just there. But in reference to Mr. Potter's recommendations and his legal opinion, I personally believe that on any cases that involve the city of Glendale, for us to be able to say we made a decision that was clear of any kind of influences from the city in a closed session arena, that we felt that having an outside counsel, especially someone like Mr. Potter, who is not very shy in saying, I don't agree with the city on A, B, and C, is something that we really look forward to. And I believe that the cost of Mr. Potter's legal opinion is minimal compared to what we actually get from Mr. Potter. I really do believe that the city saves in the long run hundreds of thousands of dollars because we put together such a solid case, either to affirm a termination or to reject a termination. Either way, I mean, we've done both. So as such, I requested this because I think that when I leave and we leave, I think that this should be maybe a yearly number that should come in front of people. We wanted people to see what's going on and how we've improved the process, at least to a point. And I do believe that on some of these hearings, I don't like what I see still, but it is what it is. The city makes a decision, and the department makes a decision to pay it. But I do agree that Mr. Potter is extremely, extremely well-versed to give us opinion, and I don't like to see the city attorney coming and giving us advice, to be very honest with you, because it creates, in a closed session with closed door, it creates this atmosphere that maybe the city attorney is telling us how we should decide on a particular case. When we take that away, when we take that, even an appearance of that recommendation, I think it makes us look a whole lot more legitimate than it does when we have the city attorney sitting with us in a closed session telling us to fire or not to fire someone, or to give some kind of a hearing. So that's the reason that we've decided to go with Mr. Potter. Just wanted you to know the background on that as well.
Well, I thank my colleagues. I appreciate the comments. I understand them, and I would move, if necessary, to note and file the report.
Okay.
We need to take an action? No,
I don't think we need to take an action. I think we just file the report and thank the city. Swear up at you.
It's certainly within the commission's purview to, if you'd like to take formal action, you may. It's not necessary.
Because no action is being taken and we're accepting the report, we just accept the report and file it.
That's fine.
Thank you. What's next?
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, agenda forecast is here for you to review. Next meeting, we will have our quarterly advertising budget expenditures report. We'll also have a year-end report on that entire fiscal year of 08-09. At the following meeting, we will have the reorganization of the Commission, and the meeting after that, second meeting in August, a discussion of the workforce demographics report. Those are the main items that are upcoming. If you have any questions or want to add anything, please let me know.
Mr. Devine, you had a suggestion, maybe?
Well, I was going to suggest, with the concurrence of my colleagues, that on the meeting of 7/22, apparently you only have
8.
I'm sorry, no, 7/22.
7/22, yes.
Yeah, we only have the advertising budget report, and assuming there are no urgent issues that we need to do, personnel matters, perhaps we can consider canceling that meeting and carrying that over to the meeting when we'll all be here on 8/12.
Mr. Chair,
All but Mr. Doyle.
All but Mr. Doyle.
Yeah. If I could briefly consult with my staff over here, if they know of anything on the 22nd that's pending.
Mr. Narcissian wakes up, maybe we can get some answer. I'm just kidding, Mr. Narcissian. I'm just kidding.
I do know that there was one item that we had dealt with, amending the resolution relative to the unclassified reports. An additional position was approved for the economic stimulus money. Planning to bring that back on the 22nd, but I frankly don't think that is urgent. That we may, in fact, begin the recoupment process, but I think that could probably wait till the August 12th meeting. So,
Okay, well, the July 22nd meeting is canceled.
I agree.
Done.
very good.
Any other dates you want to cancel, Mr. Devine? Doesn't seem like there's a huge discussion on this. Okay, thank you very much. That was a good suggestion. Thank you.
Cancel the one where we're reorganizing the commission and name you, president for life or
Yeah,
chairman
no.
for life.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's a. not
I
a
wouldn't
good
vote for it, but
Actually,
we could try
the
that.
only. Well, okay, that's fine. The only issue was that Mr. Coleman was going to join us on that day for his first meeting.
This will give him an extra
But it will
week.
give him an extra 2 weeks for him to recover.
And then we can really all be here to welcome,
That's
except
it.
Mr. Doyle, to welcome him back.
Doyle could be
Doyle can
here
always cancel
via
his vacation.
satellite.
Sure, why not?
Where are you going to be, Mr. Doyle? We'll via satellite. We can connect and we can talk to you.
I think I want to announce that.
Yeah, okay. That's a good idea.
Tape a message and we'll put it on the TV. Roy, we're so glad to have you back. You can have,
All right, what's next?
Past, reports and information passed to employee performance evaluations.
So, Devine, you want to do the honors?
Well, sure. This month we have city clerk's office with no past dues, city manager's office, city treasurer, development services, finance, fire, human resources, planning, police, and public works. And the departments with first notice is city attorney's office, Sparpetian, community development and housing, water and power, information services, there's 2 first notices out there, library, parks and rec with 2, and that's it. On second notices, we only have 1 department, the community development and housing and library. So it looks like in comparison to last month, we have a few more first notices out there that perhaps need to be looked at and asked to get the evaluations in fairly soon.
I think community development and housing had just had an appointment.
Change of-
department.
change
There was
of
a
the
change
head,
of a department head. I think Mrs. Madeline Blake is no longer there. There was a new appointment there. I think that's one of them. But Department of Glendale Water and Power is a new one. So we'll hopefully not see it often. Any questions, comments? What's next?
Civil Service Commission and staff comments.
I do have a comment. Whoever went back and got this information, I don't know if it was the city attorney's office, probably was, yes?
It's a coordinated effort of the Human Resources Department, Ms. Torres, and several members of the legal staff.
That's great. Sandra doesn't get recognized for all the work that she actually does for us, but she is the heart and soul of the commission, really, with Mr. Dole's, of course, assistance. But Sandra doesn't get enough attention for everything that she does for us, for not only for this, but for everything you do. Thank you very much.
Great.
I'll second
my
that
comment.
if that's a motion.
I'll third it.
Okay. We will be adjourning into closed session. We will be reporting out, but it will not be on TV. Thank you.